Hi, this is Brien Foerster coming to you from Paracas in Peru, and I want to give you an update as to the recently released DNA results of the Paracas people. Now, it's taken us 5 years since we began this process to actually get the results. It took almost 3 years to get, or 2.5, to get permission from the Ministry of Culture of Peru, who we worked with very closely, especially with archaeologist Ruben Soto, in order to have the DNA testing approved by the government. A total of 18 skulls was tested, and results came back from 12. The DNA was so badly degraded after 2,000 to 3,000 years that of the 58 samples of 18 skulls, we got results from 12 of the skulls from 2 different laboratories, one in Canada, the Lakehead University, and another one at UCLA in California. A third lab was also utilized at Santa Cruz, University of California, but they stated that of the, I think, 18 samples they were given, no results were forthcoming. We're not sure if that's true, or whether the results were so bizarre that they decided to hide them. So, in what I can basically tell you is that all Native American people of 100% Native ancestry are supposed to be and were of the haplogroups A, B, C, and D. So this is one of the Paracas elongated skulls. This is one that we believe is natural in shape. And as I turn it, you will see the complexity of the design. You see all that amazing curvature, and basically there's a depression here where the 2 hemispheres would be. The eye sockets are very large. And there's a lack of a sagittal suture here. So the results that we got, 4 of the elongated skulls were of haplogroup B, which relates to the fact that there was Native American ancestry involved, but the other ones were not. And the most common haplogroups that showed up were U2E and also H, H1A, and H2. If you look at where the most prevalent percentage of U2E and the H1s are, it is in between the Black and Caspian Seas, as in the Caucasus Mountains. And so that's very intriguing. What I can also share with you is what I believe was the migrational pattern, because these people, like some indigenous people of the Caspian area and Black Sea area, were and are dark red-haired and also very light skin and green eyes. And this seems to correspond as well with the elongated skulls. So I believe what happened was about 3,000 years ago, the ancestors of the Paracas decided to leave the area because they were being invaded by someone. And so they traveled south through Iraq and Iran to the Persian Gulf, and there they wound up sailing eastwards and eventually found their way to the coast of Peru. There are different routes they could have used. They could have gone through Hawaii. They also could have gone through New Zealand, but then they wound up at the largest natural bay on the coast of Peru, which is Paracas, and that's where they decided to live because there was basically no one living there. They could live in peace, and that's where they developed their high culture. We were able to find examples of lost ancient high technology at different sites in Mexico, so stay tuned for those.
Hi, this is Brien Foerster coming to you from Paracas in Peru, and this is part 2 of a 5-part series about the elongated skulls DNA results from Paracas. Now in part 1, I briefly discussed the anomalies that were found in a number of the elongated skulls. 18 were tested, and good results came from about 12 or 13 of them. And the most commonality that I can glean from this is that the occurrence of the U2E haplogroup and the occurrence of H haplogroup, including possibly H1 and H1A, maybe even H2, mean that the point of origin for the Paracas would appear to be somewhere in the Caucasus area in between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Now, after doing a little more research, I've been able to focus on more the Black Sea area and actually Crimea. Now, this may seem strange, but the DNA does seem to point in that direction. And another interesting thing is that the largest elongated skulls in the world are found in Paracas, Peru. And then the second largest elongated skulls, which look very much similar to the Paracas, are found in the Black Sea area and in the Crimea. The Paracas culture lived between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, and those elongated skulls found in the Crimea, again, are also around 2,000 plus years old. So the timeline is very similar. Now, I've also shown photographs in the beginning of this video. All of those are from the Black Sea area. And then also, if we try to look at the migration pattern, which I show maps of, it would appear that these people were displaced. Initially, they headed south into the Persian Gulf. Then they were able to catch winds and currents and travel eastwards, and then catch what is called the countercurrent into the Pacific. That could have taken them as far east as Colombia and Ecuador, and then simply by waiting for the winds to change from predominantly south, coming from the south to coming from the north, they could have easily sailed down the coast of South America and found the largest natural bay in Peru, which is exactly at Paracas. Also notice the photos I showed you of the textiles, because the first 2 textiles are of the Paracas. The third one is from the Crimea area. And notice the very complicated coloration and tight weaving. The Paracas were the finest weavers in the Americas. And how could this be that they were a crude culture and then all of a sudden they developed all of these incredible colors? I think that is a key that links them back to the Crimea area. Not to mention the elongated heads. The ones in the Black Sea I don't think have been DNA tested yet, but that's something I would definitely like to pursue. And then the other thing is that there are thousands of date palm trees located here in Paracas. When you travel north towards Lima, they disappear. When you travel south towards Nazca, they disappear. So the focal point of these date palms are here in Paracas, and nobody uses them to this day. They don't eat the dates, they don't use the palm fronds for anything. In the Middle East, the date palm is one of the most, by far, important plants. And I believe that as these people were escaping south towards the Red Sea, they may have collected some of the dates and nuts, knew their importance, and took them with them, or seeds, took them with them on their eastward journey and planted them here in order to utilize the products. So that is part 2. And then in part 3, we're going to get into probably Rick Woodward, who's an anthropologist who studied the foramen magnum, which is where your spinal column enters your skull. It's much farther back than it should be in the Paracas skulls, and that indicates a genetic anomaly. That the foramen magnum being so far back is because the skull was so large and kind of leaning backwards that the foramen magnum genetically was there in order to keep the skull erect.
Please focus on what's called the foramen magnum, where your spinal column enters the bottom of your skull. Now, first of all, in a normal skull, there is what is called this sagittal suture in red. but it seems to be completely lacking in what we call the natural elongated skulls of Paracas. Also, the foramen magnum of a normal skull is located at the balance point near the center. And in the Paracas skulls, it's physically way to the back. That is genetic. Note here with this baby skull that the neck is at the very back. Very unusual. And we were very fortunate to have Mr. Eric von Daniken go through the DNA results recently, and he's completely fascinated. He visited our Paracas Museum and will be returning many times. Now this is what we call cranial deformation. You can tell the volume of the skull is that of a normal human, and the forehead and the back of the skull have been flattened. So this is what cranial deformation on the coast of Peru looks like. This, on the other hand, is what we call a natural Paracas skull. You can see the volume is greater than the previous skull I showed you, and the whole shape is much more complex than simple cranial deformation. And so we think this person was born with an elongated skull. Also, as you saw in the photos before, at the beginning of the video, the foramen magnum, which is where your spinal cord column, vertebrae enter the bottom of the skull, is positioned at a place of balance, the balance point, which is an obvious evolutionary thing. But the anomaly in the Paracas elongated skulls that we believe are natural, and even some with with headboarding, their foramen magnum, as you can see here, is at the back of the skull. So that is a genetic trait. You cannot change the position of the foramen magnum simply by binding a skull, because trying to do that, especially with the baby, you would wind up killing that person or that child. And so this is one of the genetic characteristics of what we call a natural elongated skull. Also, the suture lines. Here is the suture running across this way, but there is no sign of the sagittal suture whatsoever. And notice the curvature here, as if the two hemispheres are being represented, or the shaping was done by nature in order to have this dip inside of here. Also, the eye sockets are up to 50% larger than normal. And these bones in the back, these tiny bones here, are not in a normal human being. These are called Inca bones. They are found in the royal Inca people, but also clearly here in the Paracas as well. So that is another genetic characteristic, and that may in fact link the elongated skulls of Paracas, Peru, who died out 2,000 years ago, with the rise of the Inca culture. It's quite possible that the Inca and the Paracas shared ancestry. It's said in the Spanish Chronicles that the royal Inca people had reddish hair, and of course the Paracas people also had reddish hair. So that is your update for now. I will be doing at least 2 more parts. In one, we'll be looking at the blood type differences between Native Americans and the Paracas. And also, in another part, I'll go into a more detailed description of the differences between Native American DNA, as in haplogroups, and those found in the Paracas. Thank you so much. Please watch parts 1 and 2, and stay tuned for parts 4 and 5. This is the brilliant artist Marcia K. Moore of the United States, and she is going to do facial reconstruction of this Paracas skull called Cinnamon that died about 2,000 years ago. So she starts out by doing computer imaging of it, in 3D. And of course the work in the beginning is kind of crude and simplistic, but then she starts to layer it. Cinnamon was a Paracas woman who died at the age of about 16, 2,000 years ago. And this is Marcia's computer image of what she thinks that Cinnamon looked like, with variations in terms of hairstyle. We know that Cinnamon probably had dark reddish hair, which is typical of the Paracas royalty. And here she's experimenting with jewelry, and here even basing it on people who had elongated heads about 100 years ago. And so that is the computer work that she has done. And now, here is a casting of a true Paracas skull. Again, this is Cinnamon. And now she's starting to build up from the casting itself, fleshing it out in 3D. You can see she's put eyeballs in. And gradually, layer upon layer, Cinnamon comes back to life. She hasn't quite finished it yet, but she is at the final stages of completing Cinnamon. Again, the addition of more layers, muscle tissue, and now working on the finer details. And here is where she is at in February 2018. This is the Cinnamon skull that was in the previous YouTube video. And for at least 7 years, I've been sending Mark Laplume photographs of elongated skulls, not only from Paracas, but from other parts of the world. And Mark has done faithful reproductions based upon his artistic talent of what these ancient people who lived 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, what they looked like. Now Mark has done this free of charge, and again he has made at least 2,000 drawings based on some photographs that he's found from ancient collections, again, as well as those sent to him by me and by other people. What he does enjoy having are multiple views, so that way he can get the proper curvature of the face, etc. And here we see examples of his work. Now, Mark has a Facebook page called Root Race Research, and in that you can find possibly all 2,000 of the drawings that he has done. Now, as you can see from Mark's perspective, the ancient Paracas people were not very Native American looking like. They look more European-ish, but that is his impression. That's not some kind of influence that I tried to make on him. And now with the recent DNA evidence results that we've received from 18 different Paracas skulls, there are indeed European and or Eurasian haplogroups associated with the ancient Paracas people, which according to standard academia should not be there. But data does not lie. So please check out his Facebook page of Root Race Research. And though you may think that this is not drawn from an actual skull, it is, because several of these have been found not only in the Paracas area, but other parts of Peru. This part is about the team of people who were involved in this process. There were 10 important people involved, and I wish to give a brief description of each and what their role was. Of course, I was the coordinator in Peru itself. I've been studying the elongated skulls of Paracas for about 10 years, and so I was the one coordinating between the Ministry of Culture, specifically Ruben Garcia Soto, who is a leading archaeologist for the Ministry of Culture in Ica, Peru, and making local organizational things like transport, etc., hotels, etc. And I did this along with the vital assistance of my wife Irene. And then in the United States, the main coordinator by far was Dr. L.A. Marzulli. L.A. made several trips down, sometimes with team members, sometimes with simply one camera person. And if he was not involved, there's no way this process would have reached its climax, which it has now. He was responsible for coordinating with the 2 DNA labs located in North America. Also, he was able to get the $100,000 which was utilized and required in order to be able to do the proper DNA testing in 2 of the 10 top DNA laboratories in the world. He did this as well with Mondo Gonzalez, who is an American archaeologist. Mondo wrote up the report at the end. He was involved in the sampling here in Peru, both at the Ica Museum and the Senior Juan Navarro Museum in Paracas. So Mondo was a very vital person to have. Then we also had Chase Klosky, who was responsible for making sure that the environments, both at the Ica Museum and also the Paracas Museum of Senior Juan, were as sterile as possible. She was the one who took the samples as soon as they were removed from the skulls and put them into perfect sterile packages, labeled them, packaged them, and brought them to the United States. So without Chase's help, we would get a lot of accusations of contamination, but both laboratories said that the work Chase did was superior to what was required. So hats off to her. Then we also had Richard Shaw, who documented the entire process. He came down multiple times, sometimes just with L.A. Marzulli, sometimes with the team. He recorded all of the DNA sampling, the locations such as the Chongo Cemetery, and other places as well. So without his documentation, we wouldn't have the full evidence. So Richard did a brilliant job. And also then Dr. Malcolm Warren, an American chiropractor, Dr. Michael Alday, a medical physician in the United States of 35 years of experience, and Rick Woodward, who is an anthropologist in the United States. The 3 of them were mainly studying the abnormalities or differences of the elongated skulls of Paracas, Peru, as compared to normal skulls and also other skulls of other cultural groups of this area. And they were able to figure out that the lack of the sagittal suture here is probably a genetic abnormality, not the idea that it was prematurely closed or calcified. It seemed to simply not be there according to them. Also, the eye sockets appear to be larger than normal, and the foramen magnum, which again is where your spinal column enters the bottom of your skull, the position of it is much farther back than is normal. And so all 3 were able to figure out that there's no way that the movement of the foramen magnum backwards like that could be the result of cranial deformation. It has to be genetic. Also, the opening of the foramen magnum appears to be oval and not round as it is in Homo sapiens sapiens, and that's another abnormality. And I believe all 3 concluded that the necks of the Paracas elongated skulls would be longer and thinner than normal. So those are the factors that they figured out. And also, of course, Ruben, the archaeologist in Peru, in Ica, was vital because we had to do this with the Peruvian Ministry of Culture. There was no way that we could take even little powdered samples of Paracas material outside of Peru for testing without the approval of the Ministry of Culture of Peru, and without Ruben's assistance, that would have been almost impossible. So my personal thanks to the other 9 members of this group that worked together very well, and hats off to all of them for their expertise. Now, in part 7, what I'm going to do is get into a more detailed discussion of the actual DNA haplogroups that were found, because many of them were not indigenous to the Americas and were not present supposedly in South America technically before the first Spanish arrived in the 1500s. So this means that 2,000 plus years ago, there were people called the Paracas, a very complex DNA background that were living on the coast of Peru. I'll also discuss blood type samples that were taken, and supposedly prior to the arrival of the Europeans in the 16th century, all native people, especially of Peru and South America in general, were supposed to be 100% blood type O, and this is not the case. So I'll get into that in the final 7th chapter of this series. Thank you so much for your interest. This is the summary of the DNA testing of the Paracas elongated skulls and related abnormalities found by medical professionals in the skulls themselves. Now, the academics that we are associated with here in Peru and elsewhere, their prediction for the results of the elongated skull testing, of which we had 18 different skulls tested, was that the haplogroups that would be found would be A, B, C, or D, because those are the haplogroups of the Native American people whose ancestors crossed over the Bering Land Bridge 12,000 plus years ago. We have sent the data out to different academics. Those that wish to examine the data are welcome to contact us in order to do peer review, should they wish. But I think they will be somewhat disturbed with the fact that some of the haplogroups of the mitochondrial DNA that came back were, in fact, a few were B, which is typical Native American, but other ones that showed up included U2E, K, J, and H. And the commonality of those are they were all found around the Black Sea and Crimea area. Also, the largest elongated skulls in the world, aside from the Paracas, have been found in the Black Sea and Crimea area. So I'm now working on that relationship. There must have been some kind of maritime movement 3,000 plus years ago from that area, is my thesis.
As regards the physical abnormalities, as I said in previous videos, the foramen magnum, which is where your spinal column enters the bottom of your skull, is at the center point in Homo sapiens sapiens, and it is quite round in shape, but the ones of the Paracas elongated skulls are significantly to the back and oval and narrower, so they probably had longer, thinner necks than Homo sapiens sapiens. And that, of course, is a genetic abnormality that cannot be explained by cranial deformation. That was confirmed by the medical experts that we had in this book, which is available from LA at lamarzulli.net. And also, it will be explored by other medical professionals, such as my radiologist friend Ken. And then also there are things called foramen ovali, I believe they're called, which are up and inside here in the skull. That is where nerve and blood flow comes out to feed the face, and that gives us our facial expressions. They seem to be absent in the Paracas elongated skulls, which means their facial expressions would have been very different from us, which again is an abnormality. Also, the two holes in the back of the skull in the Paracas were for blood and nerve flow because of the elongated nature of the skull, and not in the book, but the blood types are very curious. 12 different samples of ancient Paracas elongated skull blood was tested, a paper was written, the paper was then removed by other academics because it doesn't conform to standard or the standard story of history. 100% of Native American people who are 100% Native American genetically, from Mexico all the way down to the southern tip of South America, were and are supposed to be blood type O, 100%. But the results of the Paracas were actually of 14 samples. Blood type A, 28.5%, blood type B, 7.1%, blood type AB, which is the rarest on the planet, 21.4%, and only 43% were blood type O. So Will Hart and I, who is an author, will be writing a paper for Nexus Magazine about this. What we can basically say is that the Paracas were a very complex genetic being existing 2,000 plus years ago on the coast, and the genetic anomalies are very curious because, again, they should only be A, B, C, and D, but there seems to be a very powerful Eurasian component to their DNA. I don't know if academics will bother writing papers about this, whether they'll attack us. The results are the results. Data is data, fact is fact. And so that is the summary of the story. We're at a small village called Patapatani on the shore of Lake Titicaca, the southern shore in Bolivia, and my mind is blown because inside this little museum is a 7 to 9 month old fetus of a baby with an elongated head. So this proves that there were people in the past who genetically had elongated heads, and we're fortunate that we have Ken with us, and Ken is a radiologist, which means he's an expert on human anatomy and disease. So we're going to interview him after you see the baby. So here we have Ken, and here we have the fetus baby. Ken, as a medical practitioner, can you tell us what we're looking at?
So we're looking at the fetus here. The ribs are not expanded, so this fetus likely died between 7 and 9 months, or was a stillbirth. We're looking at a somewhat elongated head. The anterior fontanelle is more posterior than normal. So, trying to think of a reason why you would have a stillbirth between 7 and 9 months usually is the result of a genetic anomaly. So this is either the result of inbreeding or the breeding of something with human is not compatible. But in any event, the fetus is got human-like characteristics, but it also has non-human-like characteristics in the sense of the elongated skull.
Uh-huh. So in terms of the anatomy, the number of ribs are normal?
The number of ribs I counted were, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There were 12 ribs
Okay,
on this side.
so that's normal.
So that's normal. The pelvis looks normal, the femur looks normal, tibia and fibula look normal on this side. The jaw is displaced, but looks normal, no teeth. The orbits look normal. And the cranium is elongated with posteriorly displaced anterior fontanelle. The sutures appear human-like in the sense that they've got the lambdoid, the coronal, and the sagittal sutures. No extra sutures are noted.
The head is literally the size of the body. Do you know of any disease that could cause that?
You could have hydrocephalus,
Uh-huh.
which would cause the enlarged head like that. And that's about the only thing I can think of that would enlarge the head.
But do you think this is
Genetically.
hydrocephalus?
I don't know. I do not know. Could be the result of genetic inbreeding,
Uh-huh.
or it could be, like I said, breeding with something that's not compatible with human.
So are you literally saying with that last statement that this could be the product of a Homo sapiens breeding with a non-Homo sapiens?
That is correct. That is what I'm saying.
So sorry, you're saying similar
Similar, yes,
but not compatible.
correct. They have to be similar in order to get a fetus to be 7 to 9 months. Whereas if they were completely incompatible, there wouldn't even be implantation.
Uh-huh.
There wouldn't be any embryo at all.
So you heard that, and that came from Dr. Ken, who is a radiologist, a physician from the United States. He believes that the fetus that you were just looking at could be the byproduct, unsuccessful, of the breeding between Homo sapiens sapiens and something else. Something closely related to Homo sapiens sapiens, because otherwise you would not get a possible baby. But he has stated quite convincingly and straight that he believes that that is not Homo sapiens sapiens.
Ni siquiera respiró.
Sí. No respira.
Mujer.
Mujer. De repente su bebé.
No sabemos si es totalmente un humano. Pero el cráneo, ¿no? Es tan inusual, ¿no? Y el tamaño de la cara, que es tan pequeñita, y el cráneo gigante.
Varoncito, mujercita. ¿No se puede ver?
Sí, no.
Varoncito.
Ah,
Esta venadita que tiene se llama. Por ahí va a tener el traje.
Pilas, a ver, voy a ver si ven pilas. ¿Y pilas hay tienda aquí?
So we're here with Dr. Ken, and can you make some comments, please, about what it is that the viewers are looking at?
We're looking at a skeletal structure, and based on the pelvic bones is likely a female. Based on the size of the humerus and the size of the femur, we're looking at someone that may be 5 feet to 5 feet 4 inches in height. Based on the degeneration of the bony structures and lack of degeneration of the bony structures, this is a very young individual, likely 20 years of age, plus or minus 5. Younger than that, actually. As you take a look at the teeth structure here, we're looking at teeth, and then we're looking at teeth that are underneath it, still within the maxilla. So we're looking at teeth that have not come out yet. So the teeth that are exposed are the baby teeth. So that puts this as a younger child. So we are looking at a child.
So how old would you estimate based on the teeth?
Based on the teeth, you're looking at between 8 and 12 years old.
Wow.
So, again, looking at the skull, looking at the orbital features, you've got the sutures along the orbital floor which haven't quite fused, which goes along with a young individual, but their orbital apex has a single hole, which goes along with more for normal orbits, normal globes, normal eye socket, or normal eyes. The anterior fontanelle is posteriorly displaced, approximately 7 centimeters from normal. The sagittal structures are normal. There are no extra sagittal sutures. So we are looking at a human being with a variant skull.
And based on your medical expertise, you do not think this is the result of cranial deformation or head binding?
Definitely not. If you look at the bowing of the frontal bone, it's not flattened, so it's unlikely that this is the result of cranial deformation.
So it is quite possible that this individual was born with this elongated
Yes,
head.
this individual was born with a skull structure exactly like this. This skull is different than that of the skulls in Paracas because the occipital bone is not protruding posteriorly as the Paracas skull has got. And also there are no extra sutures along the posterior aspect. However, the cause of death is not trauma.
Okay. So Ken, based on what you've seen of the larger skeleton that is in the glass case, what can you tell us about it?
I believe it's a young female who didn't die from trauma, and based on the skull, there certainly are a lot of human features, but it has an elongated skull, and so the question is that a genetic variant, or is that something that is non-human? And the answer is I don't know. But it certainly is a young female.
And what age would you estimate?
I would estimate between 8 and 12 years of age. Most of the teeth have erupted, and those are permanent teeth that you're looking at, but there is one tooth on the right that still has a unerupted tooth yet. So you're looking at an older child.
Of 8 to
12, 8 to 12 years of age.
Well, here we are
in the little town called Andahuaylias. This is where the Waikiki skeleton is located, and we're being given permission to do extraction of some powder in order to do DNA testing of this fascinating specimen. And here we're going to take samples from a specimen. The Senior Renato, who's there in the middle, is the custodian, and the specimen is called Waikiki and is very intriguing.
Sí, así es. Y su cabeza de ejército.
Si lo ayuda a sacar esta vitrina grande.
Claro.
Esto es.
Si no, la grande saca
Después damos tiempo para las joyas, ¿ya?
No te preocupes, no te preocupes.
Peggy,
Yes.
when we're done with this, we go and see the jury.
Voy a guardarlo, señor Renato,
Ya,
hasta
sí,
que me digas.
sí.
Ya, para que estén libres.
Pero lo voy a...
Si no, yo voy a sacar eso que me dice nomás.
Ya.
¿Muestra coquita? ¿De cocaína?
¿Quién intervino?
Here in Andahuaylias, and we're at a place, a little museum, Senor Renato's museum. You'll meet him in just a few minutes. Senor Renato is the man who discovered this artifact, which is called Waikiki. And our tour guide in 2013, when the first time we came down here, Brien Foerster, showed us this, and we were all just completely blown away. You can see some of this in Watch Year 6. But the reason why we're here again is to revisit this incredibly enigmatic artifact. What is it? And we're here to look at some of the morphology of it, the way it's constructed, because we know now that many of the Paracas skulls, the foramen magnum is pushed all the way back to the occipital plate. That being said, we've never seen where the spinal column goes into the skull for Waikiki. We're here to do that, and we're very excited by that. Also looking for maybe other morphological differences that would set Waikiki apart. Is this just a genetic anomaly, just something that we can dismiss, it's a freak of nature, a one-off, or is an outside agency somehow manipulating the human gene pool for ends that we're really not sure of?
soft tissue.
But before we do that, can we turn it? I want to
Sí.
get a shot of the spinal column.
He might be able to hold it because I don't
Okay.
think. Usted lo mantiene así para que no se pueda.
Ya.
La espaldita, ajá, para que le tomen su foto.
Oh man. So we're looking at one of the very few artifacts that we've ever seen with the spinal column completely intact, and as you can see, it appears to go into the rear of the skull. Of course, an X-ray is really the only way we're going to be able to tell what it is we're looking at, and also how many vertebrae, if there are extra vertebrae, where there's too much skin on the area here to really ascertain and count the vertebra. And you can see the spinal column coming up. Here is the occipital plate. And because of the skin, which is right here, it's very difficult to count how many vertebrae we actually have into the neck. We'll see if we can remove this piece of skin so we can see what it is we're looking at. Very, very fragile artifact. Turn it to the side this way and tilt it up. You can see right here, this is a really good shot. Can you zoom in on that? We get a real shot of the vertebra here. It appears that it comes into the occipital plate. So without an X-ray, I can't be certain, but it seems like it's in the rear of the skull. Once again, genetic. Once again, a characteristic that we find only in the Paracas skulls.
Todo esto.
Sí, un pedazo de cosilla. Pero dice que la mejor zona son
So,
los,
like the best play,
las partes blandas, estas por ejemplo,
Is the
¿no?
what?
Due to the soft tissue, that's the best way to do the test.
Lo del cuello es normal.
The neck was normal.
How many ribs?
¿Cuántas costillas salió en el
11.
11
And how many do normal people have?
to 12.
Okay. I think it's actually,
normal, ¿verdad?
I think she
Hey,
actually has
normal
10, and normal people have 12.
Here was Senor Renato, who actually was the person who discovered this artifact called Waikiki. And I'm going to ask him some questions. Senor Renato, where did you discover this? How did you discover this?
¿Dónde lo descubrió, señor Renato, y cómo lo descubrió?
En una montaña, acá en la parte de frente a Andahuayli de Siguaro, en una montaña que se llama Huiracochán.
He found in the mountain named Huiracochán, which is between
En
the
honor-
Bolivia and Guaro.
En honor a Huiracocha, que es el hacedor del universo.
That mountain has the name of Huiracochán, honoring the name of Huiracocha, who is the God creator.
Yo la encontré en una forma casual, porque yo hago el inventario de los recursos turísticos de toda esta zona y tenía marcado un sitio cerca a eso, pero no a la misma tumba, ¿no?
He found Waikiki by accident.
Así es. Yo tenía sensación,
Got a
las ganas
feeling.
de ir por ese sitio
To go through that place
a averiguar cómo estaban los vestigios
to see how
arqueológicos,
was
¿no?
the archaeological sites in that area.
Y me encontré con la tumba ya disturbada.
And then he thought the sites that was already dig by another people,
Y en el fondo, más o menos a 2 metros de profundidad,
about 2 meters
se veía
down.
parte del cráneo, la parte de
About 2
arriba,
meters deep, he saw part of the cranium of Waikiki.
y lo saqué y lo traje acá al museo.
So he took out from the area and brought it to here.
And Senor Renato was an anthropologist.
Usted es un antropólogo,
Sí,
¿verdad? Sí.
antropólogo.
Yes.
Does he think this is a genetic anomaly or something? What does he think is going on here?
¿Usted cree que es una anomalía genética? ¿Qué cosa es Waikiki para usted como antropólogo?
Bueno, por los rasgos que yo he visto, es extraterrestre, porque
According to Señor Renato, is an alien.
Okay.
Or the features that he could see, he believes is an extraterrestre.
y parece que es mujer y que ha sido engendrada por un individuo de la Tierra, por eso que ha muerto al abortar, que el feto está ahí, ¿no?
He believed was from somebody who was human from the earth and somebody from another place.
Does he think that the DNA that was taken from two different teams, a British team and a Russian team, do we know anything about that?
Los rusos y los ingleses que hicieron los exámenes, ¿obtuvieron algún resultado? ¿Se lo hicieron saber el resultado que tuvieron?
Me dijeron que me iba a traer los resultados, no trajeron, pero me llamaron de Inglaterra y me dijeron que tenemos sus resultados, pero le va de $3,000 y me querían cobrar a mí. Así
my
que yo no
God.
tenía.
Well, the English people, the English group that came here and took the sample from here, they called him and told him we had the results, but you have to pay us $3,000 for this. So he never got any results, neither the Russian nor the English people.
So we are going to take a very small sample from the base of the spinal column, and we're going to test that for Senior Renato. And unlike the other two teams, we will give him a full report for his records. Because without Senior Renato, we wouldn't be here. And certainly without Brien or Zani, the world wouldn't know about this. So we thank them.
Senior Renato is the legal caretaker of this artifact, and therefore we received his permission in order to be able to examine the wifey skeleton. And as far as we know, that is all required. We did not need to go through the actual Ministry of Culture of Peru to do what this video shows.